Hello, everyone. Great to see this room so packed. I think this is the most attendance we've ever had in this new venue. So thank you very much for coming along in person. It's great to see you all. Right, let's get on with it. Pamela Young, welcome to the stage.
Now, we chose this topic, Hey New Zealand, what are you waiting for? Because a number of people said to me when I came back from my little around the world tour, what do you notice most? And I said, I think it might be complacency. I think that people are very comfortable here, and it seems that we have lived so far, far away from the rest of the world. And it seems like there is not enough sense of urgency compared to where I've worked in Asia and Europe. Now, the same thing occurs in Australia, because I moved to Australia after Europe before coming back home here a few years ago. And I decided that was because we thought we were too far away. And living far, far away does have consequences, which means we become really great at doing a fantastic job on our own. Because we are so far away that we become very capable. And I discovered this when I moved into Australia after, the Northern Hemisphere, and I thought, this is fantastic. They're all so skilled and talented and capable. But then the consequence of that is an inward-looking view. And so what I'd like to do is talk to you at the end of this about how do you innovate and pivot in an environment where you're so capable that you get used to having to work on your own because you think you're far, far away. Now, one of the reasons I think that we think we're so far away is because people keep drawing the map like this. The map is actually round, and we're not this far away from everybody, really. And it's been a very long time that the maps have been drawn like this, and it's given us a bit of a complex about being at the bottom of the world. But if you draw the map like this and put Asia, New Zealand, and Australia in the middle, things look a bit different. Now, the reason that we call the 21st century the Asian century is because it's the part of the world that's cooking, and it's in our back doorstep. We are part of Asia Pacific, aren't we? And there's a huge advantage to that. And so what we want to do is get focused on this view and remember that we've got this very close neighbourhood, which offers great opportunity. I stole this slide years ago. As you can see, it's the end of the slide is dated 2020. I stole it from, I think it was the ANZ economist at a presentation, one of your colleagues, a few years back. And I loved it because what it shows is that for the first 1800 years, since 1 AD, China and India had the largest percentage of GDP in the world until the Industrial Revolution came along, and they shrank because America and Europe grew. But what's happened in the last 20 years is a comeback, and they're in our corner of the world, along with ASEAN and Australia, and these opportunities are right here for us. Now, this slide here is, we've heard a little bit today about the GFC. If you go back a bit further, we had the Wall Street crash. Now, the reason I changed the name of my business to Growth Curve a decade ago was that I realized that I was constantly working with clients using growth curves. And the reason that I chose to use that method for analyzing businesses and helping them to identify what their new strategy should be, instead of the old strategic planning methodology, was because people were often on a dip when they reached out to me or when I knocked on their door. And it became evident that when we are experiencing a slowdown or a dip in our business, it's usually reflected in the economy and the world. So there are these relationships. And as you can see, there's always a recovery. But as you can see, it happens about every decade. And yet this decade, we've had two dips. We had the pandemic, and then once we thought, thank goodness for that, we're all getting better, we can open the borders again and get on a plane, what happened was catastrophe in the world. So, as you know from the talks earlier today, a lot of what happens in global economies is driven by what happens here in the US and the US dollar. We also have had, in the last couple of years, two catastrophic wars arise that have changed oil prices, shipping prices, food prices, and people are feeling the impact of that. So that impact, of course, starts globally, but it doesn't, we're not immune to it, are we? It hits the globe, those shipping prices are high. It hits the world. Oil prices translate all through the world. And of course, that's hitting New Zealand industries and your businesses. So there's a direct relationship between what's going on in the world. But let's remember, we're in the middle of the good zone, the happy zone, where there is a lot of growth and more stability than in lots of corners of the world. And so therefore, there's a big potential and a big opportunity for us to reach out. Backtracking. This is a slide of the world growth, GDP growth. And as you can see, they've highlighted Europe there in a big circle, which shows that the growth rates there over the next, anticipated for 2024, are not very high, between 0.5% and 1 or 2%. But if you look down here into our backyard, we've got 4%, 5%, 6% across Asia. Now, New Zealand and Australia is 1.1 and 1.2% predicted GDP growth for this year. Not a very big number. However, right at our back door are all these other regions, markets, where this big growth opportunity exists. In ASEAN, which are mostly reasonably developed countries with quite a good comprehension of English, and we've got good relationships with them, we trade with them. Look at their percentage growth rates, between 4 and 6%. In 6 of the 9 ASEAN countries. It's still very valuable, and we need to take a little bit more notice of it. So as it says here, Asia is open for business. Now, I left New Zealand, and my first port of call was Singapore. I worked there for 2 stints, totaling 5 years. And I have to say that was the beginning of my, opening of my eyes to diversity and to the potential in Asia. And then I went up to Europe, and I thought, oh, well, this will be great. After Asia, I'll be feeling a little bit more comfortable here. And to be honest, it wasn't more comfortable. It felt odd. It felt really challenging being a Kiwi in England, because they just said, oh, you're one of us. You're from the Antipodes. And I went, yeah. Thinking, well, what does that mean? Because we don't consider ourselves from the Antipodes, do we? But because they thought we were the same and had the same culture, there wasn't any cultural adjustment. And so therefore, to fit in there was a lot harder than trying to fit in Asia, where the cultural adjustment is obvious. You're from the East. I'm from the West, you're from the East. And so therefore, it was easier for me to operate there. But when I got to England, I felt the challenges were a bit more challenging. And the same happens in Southeast Asia. Look, late last year, I was asked to moderate at a conference in Kuala Lumpur for the New Zealand ASEAN Business Council. And I interviewed all the people who were presenting at that conference, ahead of the conference, to talk about, what are you going to speak about? How do I introduce you? What are some of the things that you think are the issues for, the question and answers, the discussion topics? And here are 2 comments that came out. The first one was from Suzie Fewtrell, who is the Trade Commissioner to Malaysia and Thailand. And when I said to her, because the conference was for Kiwis doing business in Asia, and like this conference, there were a number of people in the room in Malaysia, and there were several hundred online from across New Zealand. And she said, people don't want to come. They just don't want to come. I go to New Zealand and I give talks, and I say to them, why don't you bring your cheese or your fruit or your, manufactured goods to Malaysia and Thailand? And they say, oh, we're pretty happy here, thanks. We've got a great market. We've got enough business. We've got the people that we need. And she says she regularly gets this feedback that they just haven't got the energy or the excitement or the motivation or the will to go. Why do you think that is? Anybody care to throw?
The batch and the beamer.
Yes, the batch and the beamer. And look, I've got that on a slide coming up. You're so right. There is a sense of I've got the things that I need because I'm, successful. So why would I want to work any harder? And then the next comment came from James Robertson, who's based in Beijing. He works for Fonterra. He's a real dynamite. And he said, everybody's here, Pamela, everybody. The place is chock-a-block with people from all around the world coming to Asia to do business, and it's making it really competitive, but it pushes us to do better. So it's completely the opposite. Everyone is here but us. In a recent conversation, I was with Mark Averill, all of you would probably know from PwC, and he said, "What have you noticed?" And that was my answer to him. I said, "I think complacency might be the word, or comfort." And it is as it's here, because the SUV, the beach and the boat, and all these good things that we have in New Zealand, we are a very fortunate nation. We do have these things where you've got a couple of cars in the driveway, we've got our 2 houses, we've got the boat, and we enjoy the weekend. And why would we want to upset that? And there's a really good answer to that, which is that it's comfortable. I'm happy the kids are doing well, and that's the kind of life I want to lead. However, when you do get involved in working with people from Asia, it's extremely exciting. And they're very open to doing business with New Zealanders. They think that we're a beautiful people, great culture, and easy to do business with. So when we were at the conference in Malaysia, the advice from people was just pick a country. Pick one country and come. Don't try and do the whole of Asia, just pick a country. I met a lot of people there from New Zealand who were at the conference who were doing extremely well, and can certainly put you in touch with businesses that are doing really well up there if you'd like to talk with them. Oh, what have I done? Okay. So here's a summary. In Asia, 54 countries. That's a lot of countries, many of whom have got between 4%, 5%, and 6% growth. It's almost half the world's population, and it's right at our doorstep. And it is difficult to get up there because each country is different. If you go to America, you've got 360 million people in one culture. When you go to Asia, you've got to tackle all the different cultures. But if you just pick one and make some friends and get going, there's a big opportunity. And then, of course, we've got Australia right at the back doorstep. And I heard, Michelle Willis the other day saying, we're open, our doors are open for Australian businesses here. And I think it goes the same way. Going to Australia is tough. When I was living in Australia and went to New Zealand events in the evening like this, new Kiwis would say to me always, "God, it's so competitive here. It's really tough." And it does feel like that when you first arrive, no doubt. So it does take a while to adjust. And I know that the chief executives who have come from here and taken jobs in Australia find it quite challenging because it looks the same. We speak the same language and we're next door neighbours. But it is tough doing business there. But it doesn't mean to say you should shy away from the opportunity, because there's a lot of opportunity there. And then, of course, there's the US. Now, a couple of New Zealand companies, Pushpay and Pacific Edge. Now, Pacific Edge has had a bit of a slide in recent months because of changes to the Medicare rules in America. But both these New Zealand companies are listed companies that went straight to the US and have done extremely well. I interviewed the chief executives of both these companies last year, I think it was, because I have an online series where I interview chief executives and record them on video and put them on my website and on our YouTube channel for other people to watch. And these are two of the New Zealand CEOs that I've just talked with so far, and their stories were really amazing. And it does give you confidence that if you were to pick the US market and go up there, there's a great possibility that, like them, you might do very, very well. Okay, AI is obviously on everybody's radar as a massive opportunity, and it certainly is, and you probably don't want to shy away from that one. Technology is here to stay, and the pace of change is enormous, and I'm going to show you in a minute how quick that change is. Offshoring, back office, got much easier after COVID because technology improved. We all had to work from home, so we all improved our skill set, and everybody is better and faster and quicker at operating digitally, and the offshoring back office services have improved out of sight. Alternative business models. When I run these programs, which I'm going to show you about before the end of the session, we look at business models, and I've worked a lot with all the professional services and banking and finance. And once you've got a mindset about how you make money or how you're going to sell your time, you can get locked into that. But if you sit down with a list of different business models and look at the possibilities, there are lots of other ways to make money from your existing skill set and your existing business. You just have to think more laterally and more creatively and brainstorm with people about how do you make money using different methods from the same kind of business. And of course, don't forget Kiwi ingenuity. We are great at innovating. we've got so many stories dating back hundreds of years of our opportunity. Now, to the point of AI, people often ask, are we going to lose jobs with AI? I interviewed a professor from New York University. He, again, is one of the CEOs who's on my website and my YouTube channel. And he told me that he's been studying AI for 40 years. He did his PhD in it. And I said to him, 40 years, that's a really long time. And he went, yep, I was one of the first. And I said, well, why did it take so long for us to cotton on? You know, it's really only been the last 2 years with ChatGPT coming online. And he had all these reasons about, you know, we just weren't ready for it and we weren't open to it and we had to give things time. But the answer to the question is, it's not AI that's going to take the jobs, but the people who have got AI in their skill set will take the jobs off the people who don't have AI in their skill set. So the sooner that you can get up to speed with it and get comfortable with it, the better. Now, here we are talking to a room full of CEOs in the waiting. And 250 more online, I understand. And so what I would like to do is share with you the growth curve methodology for how do you, if you're a CEO or an executive in the top team, how do you drive a thinking process in your business to identify how to accelerate growth using a slightly different method. Now, for many years, I started off as a consultant and then I went in-house and I ran a few businesses, all professional services. And then I came back to being a consultant. And during that process, I started off with Michael Porter's, strategic planning process and in the 80s. And over time, I realized that there was big limitations to that. And I started using some other tools combined with that. And I'm going to show them to you now. So this is a comment from World Economic Forum. They are meeting at Davos every year to talk about, how do we improve the world? And this is a statement that came from them: reviving growth is necessary, but the future growth models must be different. I think we know that, don't we? Because the world is different, the pace of change and technology and things are quite different. But they've put it on the top of their list as a hot topic. And yet their second comment sounds to me like it might have been written a decade ago. So for me, there's a disconnect between their identification of the problem, which is what do we do about finding a new growth model that's going to take into account AI, because it's so new. And then they write this comment: a new growth model is needed, one that balances the drivers of growth and productivity and takes into account the complexity of innovation, inclusion, sustainability. Doesn't that sound like a sentence you've already read? It just does, doesn't it? So what that tells me is that they've identified the problem. They certainly haven't worked out the solution. They're going to dedicate the next 2 years to working out what the growth model should be. So let's get a jump start on that, shall we? When I, studied very early on, we did a lot of work around organizational design, because I did a lot of papers in design and culture and how organizations grow. And these became really useful when you're doing strategic planning, because organizations grow through cycles, like humans grow from childbirth, kindergarten, infancy, and then you go to school, and then you go to high school, then you're a young adult. Oh, Jack. You're a young adult, then you're a middle-aged person, then you're a senior, and then you're an elder. And you go through these cycles. Well, companies do it too. Companies have life cycles. And as they grow, they evolve. But like a child, when you go from teenage to adult, it's painful and stressful, isn't it? You feel emotional stress, you feel physical stress, you've got to change your clothes, and all of a sudden you think, oh, something's not working for me here. Companies are the same. And I've recognized this over and over and over. And usually when I start working with a company, they're going from one phase to another and they are straddling two phases. They've got a foot in each camp, and that's where the stress comes from. So I then started to use product life cycles. You've seen this one, you know this one. You would have studied this before. So, innovations come in, the curve goes up, people buy into the idea, then it plateaus. Well, this is the S curve Everett Rogers put together in the 1962, and there are these different phases. Now, of the people sitting in the room here, 22.5% of you are possibly innovators on this curve. And you add that to the next group, which is the early adopters, you've got 16% of the people in this room, 16% of the people who are watching us online are the possible pioneers, drivers and innovators of their business. So identify yourself if you're one of those, do you think? Do we have any innovators, early adopters in the room? Are you the one who sits in your executive meeting going, come on, let's make some changes. Come on, let's try something new. Because if you are, you're the people that we want in the room when we run these programs. Now, quite often when we run these exercises, we put people through nighttime games, and the nighttime games identify the laggards because they're the people who don't step up when we say, can we have a volunteer to come and play this game? Can we have a volunteer to do that? And all of a sudden the room empties out of the volunteers, and who's left sitting behind? The laggards, the people who haven't got the courage to step up and say, I'll give it a shot. So you want to try and identify who you are on this scope of things. So what we do, as well as, you know, the whole traditional strategic planning thought process that you might go, is that we use these two models to help you identify where is your business at on its growth curve. Are you straddling the two phases? And if you are, what kind of pain are you feeling? When we do this exercise, I always find that people get the aha when they discover something that they hadn't discovered before. And it's often to do with straddling phases, and it's often because they haven't recognised that they've got different life cycles to adapt to. So interrupt me for questions anytime if you... Yes?
You might repeat it.
Okay.
What's the option tax in an executive team? Like, everyone can't be pioneers, and obviously you don't want to be laggards.
Yep.
But what's the kind of ideal for they've got to...
Great question. What's the mix or the proportion of early adopters and laggards in any population? Well, this is a typical population. So if you've got 100 people in the room, you'd have, you know, this proportion. However, different industries have different proportions. When I interviewed the chief executive of PushPay, who is now in the US, used to be run by the founder from New Zealand, but it's now run in the US. She said to me, of course, because they're an IT company, they are mostly younger people, and tech people are more nimble. And you know, during COVID, they made rapid changes really quickly. So that industry and smaller businesses, and particularly startups, are likely to have more innovators and early adopters in their workforce. The older your industry, i.e., banking, finance, professional services, the industries that have been around for 400 years, it's much harder because you've got bigger populations with a much bigger history, and those behaviours are embedded into the, you know, the past. So if you happen to be a big professional services firm or a banking environment or a major manufacturer who's been around for 100 years or more, you'll have a lot more late majority and laggards in your business because it'll be in your culture. So you want to look deep into your culture to see how far back your values and assumptions go. Later, I'm going to give away 20 of these, and in here, there's a lot of our work in culture, which is to identify how do you shift the culture of organisations to get them up this growth curve and to move from one phase of the life cycle to another. So great question. Does that answer your question? Yeah. So it has a lot to do with culture, age and stage of the industry. Everywhere you look, how am I going for time? Okay. Everywhere you look, early innovations are replaced with new ones. You will recognise the mobile phones, and, you know, even robots started off being quite, you know, underdeveloped in terms of their design. And now you can go to some cafes in Asia and a robot will take your order and bring you your food. Here are just some pictures. I'm going to race through these in the interest of time. You know, because all of you are of the age that you remember, I would think, early versions of TVs and TVs with, you know, videos going in the side of them and so forth. There's a great bar in KL, by the way, and it's got a whole room full of ancient TVs and radios. Has anybody ever been there? I don't know the name of it, I've forgotten it. It's on the third floor, top floor. And when you walk in, there's a... Sorry? TVNZ. I'll have to ask my cousin who took me there when I was there last year. And you walk in and the whole wall is covered with radios and televisions from yonder. And it's a really exciting place. So we've had a move now to streaming. And of course, with the new technologies, things are moving so fast, that's not going to last either. Cars have gone from steam engines to diesel engines, and, you know, we're heading towards driverless cars, I'm sure. Now, this is a really interesting one because, as you can see, the life cycle of things in the black there took a lot longer because things were slower. And now in this zone here, if you just look in the last few years, the last 10 years, so many innovations had happened at a horrendous rate. And a perfect example of that is the shared economies like Uber and Airbnb and the others that have just popped up. Now, the most fascinating thing about this example is that Uber started in 2009, now is grossing 32 billion a year, which is a huge amount of money. They have, this is, across the here, we've got 3 different strands. So in the middle is the different products that they started to offer over time. And as you can see, every year they bring out a new product. Across the top, they've got their ecosystem of services that they're providing to people, which are all digital related. And across the bottom, they've got the platforms that they use to make this all possible. The interesting thing about this is it's come from one of the oldest industries in the world, transport. It was all about helping people move around, you know, their cities and their towns. So they took one of the oldest industries in the world and modernized it using technology. And they did it because there was an uprising with Airbnb to think about how do we share what we've got with other people and how do we use digital to make this happen. And so they added on these personal services. They were delivering, what does it say? Christmas trees. In December 2013, they were using cars to deliver Christmas trees, for goodness sake. And then, of course, Uber Eats are delivering food. What will it be next? And now they're looking down the track at using their data that they're collecting to introduce driverless cars. That industry is a perfect example of the things you can do if you just turn your brain on. And that's why when I come back to New Zealand, people say, what do you see? And I go, could we wake up, please? There are so many opportunities to be had. That'll teach you. Someone snuck out the back to get a top up. Okay, so as we know, the S curve, things come, things go. Now, what I'd like you to do is think for just a moment, what do your growth curves at your company look like? Have you ever done an analysis of where your company's come from, when it was started, when its ups and downs were, what the journey was like, where it's at today, what made it great, where the struggles came from, and how do you take it forward? Has anybody ever done that exercise? Excellent. Now, when you're looking at your own business, you need to look at, obviously, the world economy, which affects the regional economy, which affects New Zealand's economy, which affects your industry and all the suppliers to your industry, because it affects everyone that's supporting and training your people and so forth. Everyone, right down the line. And so what I'm going to do now is show you very quickly a case study of a global engineering firm that I did this piece of work with. So this chief executive, he had been boasting in a news report that he had done 33 acquisitions in 5 years. And I went, yay, what an opportunity for growth curve, because you can't do 35 acquisitions in 5 years and make a good job of it, because you have to integrate not just the business, but also the systems, the people, the leadership, the culture. It's a big job. And it takes effort to make sure that you do your integrations fully and completely to realize those synergies. So I thought this is a great time for me to know more about this business. I can go and help this amazing chief executive who's done a fantastic job in this global engineering firm to clean up the mess that he's probably created. So I started knocking on his door. I started knocking on his door about August or September, and I got into his diary 3 times before Christmas, but I kept getting bumped for some other important meeting. Now, when I worked in New Zealand before I went away, there was an advertising agency chief executive that I was knocking on the door of for many months, and he said, Pamela, you're the most persistent person, but you do it professionally, so yes, I'll still see you. So I did the same thing with him. I didn't give up. He said, come on the 10th of January. It's my first day back. I'll have some time. So I flew to Melbourne from Sydney to see him, went in at 1 o'clock for my 1 hour meeting, came out at 4 o'clock, didn't even have a glass of water, wasn't offered a cup of tea. But the conversation got so interesting as I questioned him about how did he manage to do these 33 integrations and how did that go? And he started off in the first 10 minutes going, fabulous, it's great. Top line's up here and everything's going honky-dory and we're expanded and we're overseas, And then the more I asked the inquiring questions about the things that go wrong when you don't do a good integration, he started to go, actually, yeah, we do have that problem. We do have some of those things going on. So there was a couple of hours, 1 hour grew into 3 hours, and the conversation grew into a brief that took me through the next 18 months with them, because they had a lot of work to do. And one of the big challenges that they had was that they had 8 different businesses with 8 different brands with 8 different chief executives when they only needed one. So what they were doing was building this great big monolithic, which cost them a lot of money. So let me quickly show you how we did this exercise with them. They are in the blue, so they were just a little bit ahead of the middle market. Had a very full range. They operated across 80 countries with 9 different business lines. And the global structure was decentralized across these 80 countries. They had 8 brands, and this is the range of them. So their oldest business, of course, was Geotechnics, which does all the groundwork, and the newest businesses were international development and environmental consulting, which was a very slick business, and development projects also very slick. So the others, rail and mining and geotechnics, were older businesses with, to answer this lady's question, they had longer tenure, they had been around a lot longer, they had a lot more people, so their cultures were quite solid and historical, and the newer businesses that had only been around for 10, 20, 30 years had much more nimble cultures and different types of people hired in them. So the culture impacted their business. And of course, then they had their 4 key operating divisions. So we ended up with this group of 12. And they said to me, well, this chief executive said to me, before the end of the 3 hours, every year we bring our top 100 leaders together for a conference. We have it in July, it's now January. Can you help us get ready? Can we do the strategic work with the top 14 leaders of those businesses and those operations? And can we get them ready to have a conversation in July about how do we fix the business? How do we get our 9 into one business, etc.? So I said, okay. So we started to design a process of growth strategy that was going to lead us to the conference in July. And the outcome of that, of course, was the business transformation program that would help them do the work that they had decided in that first 6 months to do, and then to align the culture around it to support the growth. So we went about that using both traditional strategic planning methodologies overlaid with the growth curve analysis, and we did a full analysis of each one of those 8 businesses. Now, initially, they thought that their business had been smooth sailing, but when we analysed it, there were, some plateaus along the way. And when we looked at what the causes of those plateaus were, we could see that there was going to be some lessons in that would help us go forward. They had quite a few little periods where they'd had a challenge, but no great dip, which came, of course, after the GFC. Now, what we do is we help them identify what are the core elements that make their business successful and strong and different from the competitor. So it's all about relative positions. And then we take those elements and we analyze them against the journey of each of the businesses, or each of the countries, or each of the brands. So we work with you to identify how to dissect your business so that we can get a really clear picture of what's going on. In their case, we decided to do it on each of the 8 plus the 4. Now, this is a little comment here. When you illuminate the growth curves of each of the countries or geographies or divisions, what it tells you about is the success and failures of the past. And then we use that to project the future. We use that to help you identify, let's not make the same mistakes again. And you've only got a few key things that are going to make you fantastic. So let's identify those ones and make sure that your growth pathway includes those and avoid the pathways that don't. So this is what we're looking for. They're a global business. They work across 80 countries. They had business operations in about 30 countries right across the world, including the Americas, Africa, Middle East, all across Asia, North America, everywhere. So this is what we were looking for, and this is what we found. So this is the geotechnics business. So the geotechnics team did the workshop, and they came up with this and said, well, actually, that's where we're positioned. So if you can't see what's those columns from the left is we operate our division as if it were a small business on the left. And then it goes medium business, national business in the middle, a regional business, which is Asia Pacific, and global business. And as you can see, they straddled the whole flipping range. So they'd been around for hundreds of years. They were the largest business, and they had elements of their business that were straddling all parts. So they had evolved some parts of it, but not other parts. So they had a really big job to catch up. The environs business, much less range in terms of where they were sitting in, but they were only a national business. So they weren't yet themselves operating in the globe. They were only operating in Australia. So they said, okay, well, we are not bad, but we're still operating in lots of ways as if we're a small to medium business, but actually we're quite sophisticated. We're in the top 3 in the country. We're quite really should be doing better at this. So it focused them on identifying the ones that needed to be moved up. The mining company, again, quite a big range, is partly because they had members right across the world. They had Australian members, they had Brazilian members, they had Middle Eastern members, they had people all over the world, and parts of those different parts of the geography were in some positions which were different from the others. But if you're trying to run a global business with people, let's say, in 10 different countries, and they're in different, their companies have evolved to different stages, it's going to be complex and probably inefficient and very costly. The infrastructure and strategy business, this was a consulting business that advised mostly government clients. This was the projects business, which again was a national business, and they thought that they were all doing very well because no variance here. So they were challenged about their outcome. And so, as I said at the start, what we're looking for is alignment, because if you haven't got alignment, you've got discomfort, you've got waste, tension, conflict, and stress. And I know this because I've done this so many times with organizations that when they knock on my door and they're in the dip, I say, well, let's go looking for the things that are out of alignment. Because if we find the things that are out of alignment, we'll identify the things that you need to make some decisions about. You can't do it all, so you have to get focused. And we help them to get focused, so that brings you back to your strategy and your planning and your decision-making and your preparation of your transformation project. Now, this project took 9 months to get to through the growth strategy phase and the leadership conference, and to design the transformation plan that they were going to put in place. And as it said on the bottom there, we had 4 days a month with 15 executives, and we took 9 months. That's a total of 540 executive days. It was a huge commitment, because up until this point, they were very successful. They had a huge profit bottom line, and they had money to spend. They'd never done it before. They thought it was a really exciting thing to do. And we started out on this work, not knowing it, that was going to, we didn't look at that number when we started, but after we did it, we went, crikey, that's a lot of executive time. So over the years, of course, we have to think about, how do we improve this? And when I sat down during COVID, I thought, you know what, who's really hurting mostly here? It's the SMEs. It's always the SMEs. And SMEs are 80 to 90% of most countries' GDP, aren't they? So therefore, through COVID, I sat there thinking, how can I make this easier and more accessible and more available to more people? So I decided to put it online. And I'm going to show you how that looks now. So here we are, it's in the 1920s, and I have this little theme song called Adapt, Survive and Thrive. And my online chief executive interviews series is called Thrive 2030, because the conversations are about how do we thrive to 2030, because we have to keep moving, adapting and evolving and taking on new technologies to get there. So as it says, I stopped over and thought about, how do I deliver a better outcome? And I decided to put it online and combine it with virtual coaching using Zoom, which we're all comfortable with now. And so instead of 15 executives having to come and spend 4 days a month with me in a boardroom, and you have to pay their flights and accommodation to all get them into the same spot, and then we spend 450 executive days over 9 months, I've now designed a process where I can help people go through this process in a shorter, simpler way in just 12 weeks. And you do it online, because if you're liking this presentation, I do this to video now. I get my PowerPoint slides, I put my face in a corner, and I talk to you on video so you can see me going through this process online. And you teach yourself in a cohort of either people from this room or your ELT, etc. And then you meet with me every 2 weeks for a 2-hour session where we talk about what you've learned in that video and how you've translated the knowledge in that video, what your growth curves are looking like, where your stumbling blocks are, and so forth. So in my last minute or two, I'm just going to show you what that design of that looks like. It's called CEO Expand, because it's there to help CEOs and their top teams to expand their knowledge and expand their capability and expand their confidence to do this work alone. And CEO Expand has, as I say, it's a 12-week program. It's got live Zoom coaching. You do it in your own time. You can do it with your peer group, or you can do it with your ELT. So this online program has 6 modules, and the first 2 are to help you to expand your thinking. That's where I deliver you all the models that I've just briefly shown you a couple of. And in those first 2 modules, you learn about growth curve analysis, you learn the techniques, you get to practice on other situations, and then you are ready to do your own. So in the middle 2 modules, we work with you to do your own company analysis to identify where are the growth hurdles. Lots of emphasis on finding and removing hurdles so that you can identify which ones to accelerate to move your business forward, and you identify the forward pathways and the choice of those pathways. In the last 2 modules, we talk with you about your leadership style and to help you identify when you come to the crossroads of a decision, which way do you go? Do you take the easy road? Are you the pioneer, or are you the laggard? Conversations around how do you become the leader that's going to put all this in place? How do you get other people to follow? And that very last one, module 6, called Out of the Park, because we help you to identify how you're going to sell this idea, sell the message, sell the knowledge. The great thing about this exercise is that it's not something you have to sell because it sells itself, because you get the information, it's in a model, you come out with a proof and data that shows where your business is strong, where it needs to improve, and which is the best pathway to go forward. So it's really objective, easy for you to sell to your partners, your peers, your bosses, your board, or your bank if you're looking for money. So you can go online to our website and you'll see a page that tells you all about it, growthcurve.com. There's a headline there with the details of the program. Now, I've worked across the world, so I use a lot of case studies from different places and different cultures, so that you get a sense of what other people are doing around the world. And I've worked with all kinds of businesses, listed companies, global partnerships, SMEs, startups, government agencies, the whole works. And you'll see quite a few here from New Zealand, Australia, Singapore, right across Europe, America.